case. And so let me go ahead and put us into slideshow mode, and we can go ahead and start to look at chapter 6. Okay, so what we're going to do here is start to look at the different forms of ownership of business. There are different. Please hang on to that. Please don't leave that there. Hang on to that and hand it to me at the end of class, please, just because things get lost. So they'll give me a chance just to organize it properly in case other people are sending things in. Forms of business ownership, and we're going to see that we can set up our form of business, and it's going to allow us to accomplish the objectives of the business. And really, we'll get more into that in chapter 7, but we're going to see that there are different forms of ownership, different advantages, disadvantages to the different forms. A lot of the disadvantage focusing on ease of transferability of ownership. There's taxation issues that come in, and there's liability issues that come in as well. Okay, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we can acquire, merge businesses, that sort of thing. And then chapter 7, we're going to get more into how we're going to accomplish the objectives, goals of the business through our strategic planning. Okay, so let's just go ahead and take a look at the different forms of business. And the first that we're going to talk about is sole proprietorship. Okay, sole proprietorship, typically one owner who is, in charge of making all of the major decisions for the business, usually started with one person. Of course, we could have employees, etc. Sole proprietorship form of business, ends with the life of that sole proprietor, the person that started the business. This is a disadvantage. Another major disadvantage is the unlimited liability. If you are a sole proprietor, you own your business, and somehow in transacting business in that business, someone is injured, not only would the assets of the business be at risk, but your own personal assets would be at risk. So if you had a problem and for some reason there was an accident with a delivery truck of yours or something crazy like that, not only could an injured party sue you for obviously the assets of the business, but could come after your home, that sort of thing. So that's a major concern with sole proprietor. Okay, operational requirements, they say minimal legal requirements, and the corporation, the largest form of business that we'll talk about here, tend to be more heavily regulated. Management, full control. Taxation, basically what you would do if you had a sole proprietorship is you would file a Schedule C. Okay, when you file your tax return, the Schedule C will show the business income, and then that business income rolls up to the face of, if you were using, probably use a 1040 in that case, to the face of your 1040, your personal income tax. So whatever the taxes of the business are flow through to the owner. Raising capital, fairly limited. Okay, you can probably borrow money, is the main way to maintain sole proprietorship and, still maintain that sole proprietorship status. We're going to see with corporations through the share trading of shares of stock, raising capital is much easier. Okay, so you could see some of the advantages: ease of formation, greater control, no separate tax return. I guess that's an advantage. We'll see why the issue of double taxation comes up in corporations a little bit later. Business losses can offset personal income. If you have a loss on your Schedule C, that loss can flow through to what? Flow through to your Schedule A. Now, I used to have a friend that what he would do is he would set up a business in something that he was interested in. Like he was interested in rock and roll music, so he'd have a business on the side where he was, booking concerts and that kind of stuff, right? And then, of course, he had his regular job. He was a switchboard operator at the hospital that we both worked at while he was going to college. And so what he would do is he'd go out and have all his parties and his fun and setting up parties and hiring bands and all that for it, take a loss on his Schedule C, and then he'd take that Schedule C loss over to his his W-2 income is Schedule A, and he'd say, isn't this great? I get a tax deduction for partying, And I used to warn him that eventually, I was starting to take accounting at that point, that my understanding was that eventually the IRS would look at that, and if you have 7 years of losses in a Schedule C income that's offsetting other income, eventually they will make you prove why that is a viable business and why they should have allowed that losses to flow through to your Schedule C. So be careful, don't think that you can take on, any sort of hobby, take losses on it, and then flow over to your regular jobs to protect income on your regular job. They will eventually pierce the assumption that you have a business. I'm saying 7 years, maybe it was 3 years. I forget what the amount of years were before IRS would make you prove, the burden of proof falls on you as to why that's a viable business. Okay, but personal losses can offset personal income. One of the things they don't mention here, if you are a sole proprietorship, you have to pay. Not to turn this all into a tax lecture here, and again, I am an accountant, but so it's kind of hard for me to resist sometimes. But you'd also have to pay your what? Pay your self-employment tax. So if you're employed by somebody and you earn money, you contribute towards your Social Security about 7.5% of your pay, and your employer contributes the other 7.5%. If you are self-employed, then you're going to have to contribute both the employee and the employer's portion of your Social Security. So you'd have to cough up 15%. And sometimes when folks go into their own business, this is something that they don't think too carefully about. All of a sudden they're looking at the end of the year and they've got this huge, $20,000 bill or something that they're having to pay for contributions to their taxes, and that can get a little scary. So, okay. All right. So that's sole proprietorship. Partnership, very, very similar to the sole proprietorship. The key thing that comes in a partnership that distinguishes it from a sole proprietorship is that we're bringing more resources to the table. So that second partner brings resource in terms of what? In terms of knowledge, in terms of capital, in terms of property resources that can be contributed, etc. A lot of times students will come to me and they'll say, well, I want to start my own CPA firm. What do I need to do, John, to be successful in CPA? And I said, well, the lifeblood of any small CPA firm is to actually do taxes. Okay, you really, keep the company afloat during the tax season, and then off of the tax season, maybe you can pick up an audit here and there. And so I tell them, one of the two things you're going to have to do, you're going to have to get knowledgeable enough on taxes so you can do the tax part of that I described about, or you're going to have to partner with somebody who is a tax person. So now we have a partnership in that CPA firm. One partner brings tax knowledge, the other partner brings what? Brings audit knowledge. We're really busy during the tax season. You support that tax partner, and then what? During the audit season, the audit partner sort of takes over and runs things, and we all work towards that goal. So partnership structure is usually where you look and there's somebody else who brings a skill to the table that you don't necessarily have, and then you can join up to keep the business viable and successful, etc. Okay. The major disadvantage, of course, is if you bring in a partner, you have to share the profits with them, right? Sometimes I'll tell my friends, well, I'm so busy, I wish I could clone myself to go do some of the things that I need to do. And then I think about it, I'm like, well, wait a minute, that clone would be just like me, so he'd have the same spending habits, wouldn't he? So I'd have to support that all of a sudden, so that doesn't really work out either. Okay, so if you have a partner, you got to share profits. Okay. You can run into difference of opinion. Oh, and as we said, the major difference with that second partner from the sole proprietorship is just the additional resources that are brought in. The unlimited liability that we talked about, which is a major, major disadvantage with the sole proprietorship, also exists in the partnership as well. Okay, so the partnership, they can go beyond just the assets of that partnership business and come directly after the partner's personal assets. Okay, good idea to have a partnership agreement in place. Look, it's sort of like a relationship, when it starts out, it's all lovey-dovey, and I understand you, and you understand me, and what happens at the end of a relationship? It's always, I never wanted that, and I never said that. These partnerships can work out the same way. That going in, it all sounds like a great idea, and we'll share profits this way, and now it's fine with me, oh, that's okay, and then when things start to go south, then what? Then everybody wants to, start to protect their own interests. So it is best that there be a written agreement. There's nothing wrong with it, okay? And you just tell your potential partner in business, hey, look, this is just, protecting both of us. Let's put it in writing. Let's get a solid agreement. We're on good terms now. This is the best time to do that written agreement. And you go ahead and sign that off. I would have it notarized. Okay, you can go to a notary and that notary public, and that person, notary public, and that person will go ahead and stamp that they were witness to the signing of that agreement, and then you've got something in place in the case that there needs to be a dissolution or a change to the partnership relationship. Okay, now you have two types of partners, in a partnership. You could have general partners, in which if you have a general partnership, it's just the couple of three partners that share decision making evenly. And then you can have a limited partnership, which not only has the general partners who are responsible for the day-to-day operation of the business, but then there are also limited partners. And with limited partners, they do not get involved in the day-to-day decision making of the organization, but they of course share in the profits that are made off of that partnership. Limited partners, that's a very descriptive term because their exposure in terms of liability is limited to their investment. Okay, general partners still have the full liability exposure that we talked about earlier. Okay, so and again, this construction guy versus the guy in the suit is the sort of thing where you bring in a partner who maybe has an expertise in the area that you don't. So you have the business guy versus the operations guy, I guess. Okay, good. Now you come over and you take a look at corporation. Okay, corporation is the more difficult type of business form to use. Okay, the reason being that you have to be approved to be a corporation. You have to file that with and it's usually the Secretary of State that is the one that ends up of whatever state that you're incorporated in that's responsible for doing that, signing that off, issuing those articles of incorporation, etc. So this has more paperwork up front to get it started. The major advantage of a corporate business environment is the ease of transferability of ownership, and that we will probably have shares of stock, and those shares of stock can be traded from one person to the next. You simply buy those shares of stock from one person to the next. If you want to be publicly traded, then we start running into some of the additional regulation, which can be a problem with a corporate form of business, in that we're going to have to be regulated then by the Security Exchange Commission, other state regulators, etc. And so that starts to become more of a regulation issue. The major advantage is liability. Now we have limited liability. The ownerships who hold shares of stock of the company are responsible up to their investment in the company. And after that, their own personal assets are protected. Now, often, we say that, and what ends up happening is, individuals that you're going to do business with will look to see that they can somehow pierce the corporate veil if they want to get to your personal assets. And so sometimes the agreements will go past that corporate structure. But for the most part, barring some sort of outside agreement like that, the liability is limited to the assets of the business, and the personal assets of the owners are protected. A major problem with corporate structures, this taxation issue, will be called double taxation. What happens? The corporation is seen as its own entity. And so it has to file a tax return, and they file that tax return on an 1120, and the corporation files that tax return. So if there's income on that corporation, that income gets taxed at the corporate rate, right? Now what? Now we turn around and we want to distribute those revenues, those incomes, to the shareholders. Well, when the shareholders get a distribution of that income, the individuals are also taxed on the distribution. So we have a double taxation, and that what? The corporation paid an initial tax on that income, and then when we distribute that income, the individuals who receive the income have to pay tax on any dividends or anything like that. So that money gets taxed twice, right? They call that double taxation. Okay? So you can see in the corporate structure, you have your shareholders, then you'll have your board of directors, chief executive officer, then you have your various financial officers, operating officers, sales officers, etc. And we'll talk more about structure of a company later. This is sort of your typical vertical structure of a company. We'll talk about more horizontal structures as well in the next chapter here in a little while when we get to that. Okay, now you come over, and advantages of the corporation is what? Limited liability, ease of ownership. I don't know. Is there tax benefit or not? They're talking about tax benefits here. I guess certain corporate tax benefits. Raising capital, we mentioned that. Okay. Extended life. We're not limited to the life of the owners, right? The corporation can continue on and on as long as there's people running the operation. Reporting requirements. By that we mean accounting reporting requirements. Security Exchange Commission is going to require that you report certain information if you are a publicly traded company, for example. And there's our double taxation issue, which we have a way around that, okay, which is called an S corporation. With an S corporation, and they call it S because it's subchapter S of the Internal Revenue Code, so it's named after the Internal Revenue Code. So the obvious issue with an S corporation is the taxation, and what happens with a S corporation is the earnings are not taxed at the corporate level. They are only taxed when they are distributed down to the owner. So we get past that double taxation when we have an S corporation. Now, the only problem with this is that you have to have a limited number of shareholders. So, Chevron could not be an S corporation because of the hundreds of thousands of shareholders they have. But if you have a very limited number, and I think it's something like 25, don't hold me to the number, I haven't looked at that lately, but I think it was something around 25 shareholders, then you could organize as an S corporation and you could avoid this double taxation issue if you were to organize that way. Okay. Okay, limited liability company. Basically, it's like a corporation. Okay, I've also seen it limited. I think I've also seen limited liability corporation. And all this does is it provides the full protections in terms of legal liability, right? Limited liability. So it provides the same protections in terms of limited liability that you have in a corporation, but the decision making is not as broadly dispersed as it would be for a corporation. So we don't have shareholders voting on board of directors directing. Typically, it's those that are actual partners of the limited liability corporation, those limited number of shareholders that make the decisions. A lot of CPA firms are organized as limited liability companies, in that to be an owner, you have to work your way up to partner level, and then once you work your way up to partner level, then you share in some of the responsibilities, but you still have the limited liability in that you're not really a partner like in a true partnership where your personal assets could be at risk. Only the assets of the business are at risk, and they call those limited liability companies. Okay, so you can see the different advantages, disadvantages to the different forms of business here, sort of summarize what we talked about on this slide. Okay, so let's go ahead, let's take a look at some questions. Remember, guys, you want to pay close attention to these class questions. As you saw in the midterm, these translate pretty directly into what you're going to see, in some cases exactly to what you're going to see on your test, right? So all the following are advantages of sole proprietorship except what? Except the limited liability. That was actually a disadvantage in that the sole proprietor is what? Fully exposed to any liabilities incurred by the company, and so the personal assets of the owner could be at risk. Okay, Paula's thinking of making homemade perfumes and selling them to her relatives. She has not filed any legal documents to start her business. Paula would be operating as and this is a classic example of a sole proprietorship. Okay, sole proprietorships, income and expenses flow through to who? To the personal tax returns of the owners, right? Okay. Okay, good. The most significant difference between a partnership and a sole proprietor is what? Oh, no answer on this is one. We have to think for ourselves here, right? What do you think? A, B, C, D, E? Well, is it amount of liability of owners? Huh? No, the liability of owners, as we were saying, is just as great, right? I mean, I guess it's spread over more resources of those individuals, but the liability goes directly to those owners. Yes, sir. Yeah, go. D, number of people contributing resources, right? Hey, I'm the tax genius, you're the audit genius. What was that song? You guys are too young to remember that. They used to have a song that said, "You've got the brains, I've got the muscle, let's make lots of money." Okay, it was this old song. So anyway, so whatever, right? We bring our partnership together, and was it I got the muscle? I said, no, I think it was, I've got the brains, you got the looks, is what they think was. Anyway, that's what they said in that song. Let's make lots of money was that song. So if you bring you bring the partners together, though, what? Then they can each contribute their resources, right? Okay. Okay, good. So number of people contributing resources. Good. I answered D. Huh? Yep. Okay. Okay, good. Let's come over number 18. Again, these aren't in any particular. They're not numbered in order here. It's where I took them from the test bank. I do that so I know where to go back to the test bank to find your test questions, right? Okay. So it's important for partners to spell out the details of their partnership arrangements in writing because S happens. Stuff happens, right? You think everything's okay when you're going in, and then what? When this comes to the end, there's all kinds of disagreements. So a written agreement will help reduce misunderstanding and disagreements among the partners, right? And where do you think most of the disagreements center around? Where do most of the disagreements center around in a partnership? Where do all the disagreements center around? Money. They always come down to, well, no, that's not how we were supposed to distribute. That's not how we were going to share expenses. That's not how we were going to whatever it is, right? Okay. So you want to make sure that you have that sort of stuff in writing. And you want to make sure that you're focusing on Business 125 when you're in this class, right? Okay? Okay, good. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this one. In a partnership, all profits and losses flow through to each partner's what? Personal tax returns. Okay, so really, again, the major difference between the partnership and the sole proprietorship is the number of people coming to the table with ideas, thoughts, etc. Right? Okay. Okay, good. Come over. Chris and Amy own a workout facility in which they are co-owners. Both want to take an active role in the management of the business. Each accepts unlimited liability. Those two are what? They're the general partners. If they brought in other individuals or sort of, you've heard the term, he's a silent partner, right? Well, that typically means that they don't share in the decision making and what? They also don't share in the liabilities that could be incurred by the company as well. Of course, they also have to sit there and wait for distribution of profits. Okay. Partner who invests money in business but is not involved in the day-to-day operation. Okay, well, we just see that's obviously what? That's the limited partner. Okay. Which of the following is a limit of liability of a limited partner up to their investment? Their personal assets are protected, right? Okay. Which of the following statements about the operation of a company, of a corporation, is correct? A corporation is what? Separate legal entity. Has unlimited life, separate legal entity, and so our liability is going to be limited to whatever the share value of the shares of stock that we have are, right? Okay. Okay, good. Tracy and Sally have considered starting their own business but are concerned about the possibility of losing their personal assets if the business fails. One way for Tracy and Sally to avoid the risk they would organize as a major advantage is the corporation, right? Just the business assets are exposed. Okay, again, if it's a practical matter, you think, okay, well, that's great. I'll just form a corporation and I'll go sell all kinds of shares of stock. And if the business fails, everybody else loses their money and I'm not going to be exposed there, right? Well, what happens? Nobody will buy the shares of stock. So you say, okay, well, let me get a loan from a bank then. And it's just the bank's loan that'll there. The bank will do what? They'll arrange the terms of that loan to pierce that corporate veil. So it's not as easy as it might sound that you can just raise money through a corporation and then you mismanage the business, down it goes, and well, sorry, and you walk away from the disaster and everybody else loses. Typically, to actually raise the capital that you want, they're going to have some strings attached to get themselves some protection by, including your own requiring that you include your own personal assets if you want a loan there or something. Okay, this one, Leslie is excited to begin a personal shopping business. She's planning to have employees and is concerned about losing personal assets should something happen to the business. She would like to focus on profits and building a business, but she does not want her business to pay its own taxes. What ownership structure? She could go for what? S corporation, and that the profits will flow through to her, and then she still has those same protected liability issues that we talked about. S corporation, as we said, is filed under subchapter S of the Internal Revenue Code, and what happens with an S corporation is instead of what they call a C corporation, where the corporation has to file an 1120 tax return and the profits of the corporation are taxed, and then when those earnings are distributed to the shareholders have to pay tax on that distribution. With an S corporation, the corporation itself doesn't pay tax, only the distributions are taxed to the owners. But in order to qualify to be an S corporation, you can only have, and don't quote me on the number, but it's something like 25 shareholders or fewer in order to qualify as an S corporation. So you couldn't have 10,000 shares of stock outstanding and file your taxes as an S corporation. But if you're a small, what they call tightly held corporation, then you could use the S corporation status to avoid that double taxation. Okay. Again, we describe things in textbooks here as though people are just going to walk up and say, I hear you're a corporation. Are you a corporation? Here. take some of this, right? What are they going to do? Person's going to do? They're going to still say, well, let me see. And what's the chances people are going to protect their money just as aggressively, aren't they? And you say, so you end up saying, well, I need capital. So you end up saying, well, just loan me the money. And we structure a loan in which what? I can come after your personal assets and we'll write up the loan that way. So the ability to really get things started from nothing into a corporate structure are not as easy as we might make it sound here, right? And so, you more likely would have to start out as a sole proprietorship, build up capital, credit, etc., as a sole proprietorship, and then when the time is right, you make the transition from a sole proprietorship, partnership to a corporation of some sort, right? Okay. The reason I point that out, I had this friend, again, the same guy that was doing the hobbies. He incorporated then was his next big thing. And I have to incorporate. And he rushed to incorporate, and then he had like all these business cards where he was listed as the CEO and president of his company. And he'd go out to the nightclub, and hand out his card. Yeah, he was doing all this stuff and it said corporation on there and stuff. And at the end of the day, all he got himself was an audit from the IRS when they started saying, why are you taking all of these losses and putting them on your personal tax return, etc. And he ended up having to pay all that back tax after he got found out that what he was up to, the IRS made him pay the tax, and he had to go back. And he did okay in life. He was a smart guy, but I remember him saying, I should have listened to you. Know how much I have to pay the IRS now to catch up? I told you. Okay, but anyway, so be careful with that. Okay, but he ended up being a very successful guy, by the way. So what he started doing was he just started buying condos, and he'd buy condos when the market was, was down. He'd fix all those up, and then as soon as the market came back up, he would go ahead and sell them off at a higher price when the market would come up. So he'd buy low, sell high, right? And he did pretty good that way. And the other thing, the reason he got out of the rock and roll business is that both of us started going bald. So that's when he realized he couldn't make it as a rock star anymore and decided he better find something else to do. So anyway, so we should have on one of these slides key business aspect. If you want to be in the entertainment music business, don't go bald, right? Unless you're, what's his name? Unless you're Pitbull, I guess it's okay, right? Okay, but in those days you had to keep your hair. Okay, now what happens? You come over and you have what? Not-for-profit corporation. Okay, not-for-profits obviously do not have as their objective making a profit. Okay, and so they have what? More mission-driven objectives. They do have to still file a tax return, and even though they don't pay taxes, they file their taxes on a Form 990, and they are not going to be obviously subject to taxation, but they could want to incorporate to limit their liability. Can you think of a famous not-for-profit corporation? Huh? Oh, yeah, I guess there's lots of them, huh? Yeah, Make-A-Wish, Red Cross, United Way, all of those are good examples. I'm thinking of one that you wouldn't think is not for profit. That is. Well, they are not for profit, I would think. Okay, but they don't. I mean, it seems pretty obvious that they are. Isn't there some sort of contribution thing going on with St. Jude when you go and you buy? Oh, I know, it was Best Buy. I was just there last night, in fact, because I thought my headphones were going to stop working, which they're okay now. But what happens is when you do the thing, they want you to contribute to St. Jude's. So that would probably be not for profit. What I'm thinking of, although they've changed their structure, now the NFL was not-for-profit organization. Okay, the NFL, when it was originally started, it filed under Section 501c6 of the Internal Revenue Code, which is like a club. Okay, because you had what? You had all these different club owners that were coming together to join the NFL, and they filed under the NFL charter of a not-for-profit. So even though the individual teams paid tax, can you imagine the NFL itself did not pay tax? Meanwhile, the NFL might as well have a license to print money, right, with all the things that they've got going on. So they were starting to get called out on that pretty aggressively in the news that what's going on? How come they don't, how come they don't have to pay tax? And so they recently elected to eliminate their not-for-profit status, and so the corporate offices of the NFL will now start to pay taxes. Okay. Yeah, they've given that up, and they'll start to pay taxes. I think that there was also some other issues. It was the publicity issue, but I think because you have to file these 990 forms, these 990 forms, I believe, have more stringent requirements in terms of what we have to report in regards to salary that we're paying key officials, etc. And so the commissioner of the NFL had to report that he had a income revenue, an employment contract that was worth $44 million a year. So he was starting to get criticized for that. $44 million a year. Meanwhile, they're trying to limit their exposure liability because the guys that made them all their money left brain tissue out on the field. And so, shouldn't they be ponying up some of that money towards the care of these guys now? And the settlements that were being put out were sort of considered not appropriate for what the sacrifice was of the players versus, the sacrifice of the people that were making $44 million a year in that. So I think they were also, although this was never a stated objective, I think there was, if the walls had ears, I think we would have found out that that was also part of their consideration, that it would limit the amount of reporting they were going to have to be doing if they withdrew their status as a not-for-profit in filing those 990s. Okay. Okay. Cooperatives. Cooperatives kind of have a tradition in the United States going really back to the farming days. Okay, what cooperatives would do is we'd sort of pool our resources, and we would be able to almost live almost in a barter system where we come in and I say, okay, I'm gonna take some fertilizer from you, Joe, and I'm gonna go ahead and leave my shovels over here, and when someone needs some shovels, they can come in and take my shovels, and they'll leave behind some carrots. I don't know. Okay, so it's not quite a barter system, because barter, I come up to you and say, many carrots for some soil, and we make this kind of a deal like that one-on-one, whereas a cooperative, everything sort of comes together in a central point, and then we sit there and we can, trade within that cooperative. And it could include, I don't want to make it sound like it's just, things, as we've moved out of a agricultural economy now, now it's often money that goes into the cooperative, right? But different resources will come in and be made available to different individuals that are willing to invest versus individuals that are wanting to, borrow, etc. If you really look at it, a credit union is a cooperative, and that we do what? We say the Ohlone College Student Credit Union. I don't know that there is one, but in order to be part of that credit union, what do you have to be? Come on, guys, it's in the title. An Ohlone College student to be a member of that credit union. So you have to have some sort of connection to a community in order to join certain credit unions. Now, what's happened in more recent times is credit unions have gotten more and more expansive. Now you see it's the Air Breathers of America's Credit Union. Okay, we all breathe air, so I guess we are involved there. And then you'll see they'll put a certain stipulation that if you're not in America, as long as you breathe air, we'll also let you into the cooperative, so into the credit union. So they've gotten broader and broader. In fact, the banks were upset a few years back because they're saying, Credit unions are nonprofit organizations. They're not taxed. Credit unions are nonprofit organizations. They're either filed with the state or with the federal as nonprofit organizations. So the credit unions don't pay tax, and the banks were getting upset because they were saying, "Well, wait a minute, we're taxed. Meanwhile, because of this broadening charter of credit unions, they're essentially banks too, so they should be taxed." So I actually was working on an assignment where we were describing some of the issues there to Congress about that, and that was one of the few times that I actually got to go to see a live hearing. And that's when I realized that these congressional hearings that you see on the TV all the time, they're like made for TV events. I mean, they got the lighting and they got the okay, and we're live now, and everybody goes into their roles. And my favorite guy was Senator Rangel, Charles Rangel, from New York. He's the the representative for Harlem in New York. And he was standing up there with his New York accent. He kept saying, "We're not going to tax the credit unions. There's no way we're going to tax the credit unions." He tells the head of the National Credit Union Administration, he says, "Madam, what these gentlemen up here are looking for is revenue. And they're looking under every rock they can to find revenue. You, madam, are a rock," he tells her. So anyway, they never did end up taxing them, but that was something that the banks were complaining about. Why shouldn't these credit unions pay tax just like the banks do? But that's not going to happen. Okay, Congressman Rangel was right about that. The political difficulty of taking something that people like so much, like credit unions, and taxing them politically. In fact, it was a stupid assignment and hearing that they went through because they're never going to get to the point where they tax credit unions. Okay, mergers and acquisition. Okay, is another way to expand our business. Okay, merger is when the companies agree. Acquisition is when we just come in and we buy out the stock, okay? And so usually with the merger, the two companies sort of agree, and one company will come in through some sort of predetermined agreement and buy out the shares of the stock of the other company so that they become the owners. Recent example, AT&T just bought out Time Warner. Okay, so they bought out all the shares of stock in Time Warner. That was a merger. That was an agreement. Okay, and so now AT&T owns Time Warner. Means it owns Time Magazine. What else does AT&T own now? If it owns Time Warner, huh? Or are they? I don't. AT&T's owned by T-Mobile? I don't think so. I don't think so. Maybe T-Mobile. Maybe AT&T will buy T-Mobile. But I don't think T-Mobile bought AT&T. That'd be a shock to me if that was the case. They bought out their shares. They acquired them, yeah. But it was sort of cooperative. It wasn't a hostile takeover. So what else does AT&T own now? If it owns Time Warner, it owns CNN. Okay, CNN is part of Time Warner, so it owns CNN as well, right? And one of the things you heard being talked about at that point, that one of the major reasons AT&T was interested in Time Warner is what? They're bringing to the table the wireless, industry, the wireless device industry, right? And what? But they lack content. So now, in order to compete with sort of mergers between, I think it was Comcast and NBC, Comcast acquired NBC, so they got their content. To hold parity with that, AT&T went and bought Time Warner, so now they're getting content like CNN, etc., to combine the wireless device industry with actual content. Okay, so when you look at mergers, and you see some of these up here, when you look at mergers, you could have a horizontal merger where what? And when you mention AT&T and T-Mobile, for example, if that happened, that would be more of a horizontal, right? It's what? I'm acquiring more business within the same industry, right? If we're talking about a vertical merger, now we are doing what? we're gathering some company that is sort of in the chain almost as a supplier to us. So if we're, an ice cream company, we're going to buy a cone company. This merger that I was talking about, product extension merger, is more like the AT&T Time Warner, in which what we have the wireless business, and now we're trying to grab what? We're trying to grab the content part of that. So, although I guess that could be a vertical merger. Maybe that is more of a vertical. What? The ice cream being the wireless business, and the cone being what? The content. Okay. Product extension might be if we're going outside those products. Market extension merger, okay, when we're going to do what? Add another state or something. And then conglomerates are where we really don't have any sort of, synergy in how we're trying to combine the company. We're just what? We're just trying to grow the company, get into different areas. For example, when tobacco company all of a sudden starts buying up a food industry. Well, how does that connect up? That's probably a conglomerate. Okay. Okay, good. Disadvantages of mergers, poor integration of accounting systems, etc. Power struggles, corporate cultures is a big deal, especially if you're going to be doing what? Going outside of normal geographic boundaries, that sort of thing. Okay. Okay, that's the end of that chapter, guys. I'm having a little bit of a issue where I'm going to have to take like a 5-minute break here. So why don't we take 5 minutes and we'll come back and we will continue on with the discussion here on the next chapter. Was it chapters? What are we on? Chapter 7 now? And we'll do chapter 7. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started back and take a look now at Chapter 7, getting into management of organization. We're going to start to talk about, management theories now, management processes, approaches to the management of organizations, including how we structure those. Okay, so we come over. And when we go through our management, we're going to have planning, which is really going to be goal setting, setting up our strategic plan. Then we go through and we organize. How do we set up our structure of our business? Controlling and monitoring, basically seeing how we are achieving, how effective we are at achieving the objectives of the organization. And then, of course, leadership probably comes before any of this. Is really we start with leadership probably. So, and that really pervades all these other areas. Okay, so let's just go ahead and let's take a look, and we can see sort of the management period where we have top management, middle management, first line managers. Okay. And so when we talk about successful management, we're talking about conceptual skills. That's the ability to look at, a situation and decide what the best course of action is. That can be from, the day-to-day management of the business, but it could also be finding a need, a niche in the market, and then exploiting that niche in the market is also part of conceptualizing. Technical skills. I'm of the opinion that accounting is one of the top technical skills in being able to manage the business. So much of what we use to evaluate the success of the business comes through the accounting and financial data. But there are other technical skills such as IT skills, right? Analytical skills of various sorts, I should say. Could be marketing, technical skills, etc. Time management skills, probably a key one. Okay, interpersonal skills, probably the most underrated one of the skills on this chart, and then decision making skills, ability. Sometimes just having the guts to make a decision, right? You always hear people say, "Can't you make a decision?" And I like when people say that because they make it sound like there's just one right decision or that you have in front of you all good options. And sometimes you don't have all good options in front of you. Maybe your options are all mediocre to bad. And so you're trying to decide which of the best courses of action are to take in those situations. Decision making becomes much tougher. Okay? So anyway, let's take a look at a couple of these. Can you guys see these or not on your screen? No? Everyone's yes, one person's no. Let me see. I'm working on my interpersonal skills here now, you see.
Okay, when you scroll down, like.
Do me a favor and download that.
Yeah, I try it. The one I download over here.
What if you hit that right there?
No, and then when I say open it, and then.
Oh, it's because, huh? Close that, please. And hit that right there. And then hit open. No, hit open.
Okay.
Why would you hit that? Hit open. No, hit open.
It's over here. The same thing as what when I press download.
Hit open. I don't understand this. Close that again. Okay, go back to that thing. Hit that, please. Do exactly what I tell you. Okay. Okay, now hit. No. Okay, you can hit save. Okay, good. Now hit open. Okay, now hit open. You don't have Microsoft Office on this machine?
No, I don't.
And you want me to do what? You want me to post this up as a Word file? You have Word? I see. Okay. So the problem is that you don't have Microsoft Office. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can post up the. I'll do one of two things. I could save this as a PDF. You have PDF, right? Yes, sir.
She could install a. There's some software to install or just like to view everything from Microsoft Office. Like you won't have any editing ability, but you can just view like files
Okay.
from Microsoft
So you
Office.
might want to look into that, you know, long term. The only reason I'm pointing that out, it's nothing for me to put it up there, but you'll have some classes where, your ability to talk to the person who's putting the file up is like you might as well try to talk to, you have a better chance talking to God, so you don't want to, always rely on somebody changing the situation to suit the needs of the one. But I can put up a PDF up there and I can put the Word file up. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay, so let's take a look. To make good decisions, okay, successful manager must be able to think abstractly in order to picture the organization as a whole and to understand the relationship to the rest of the business community. In other words, we have to have conceptual skills, right? That ability to see a situation and see how your company fits into it. That is often the hardest part of management, right? Because taking advantage of opportunities, etc. So, okay. Sally Hodges manages the housekeeping staff in a luxury resort. Most of the workers she interacts with are originally from Guatemala. Sally's decided to take a course in Spanish. And I looked at this. Isn't there a Guatemalan language? Huh? It is? There's parts of Guatemala where they have a sort of almost the original Indian type language. I mean, there might be some, and a lot of Guatemalans speak Spanish, but there's not like everyone in Guatemala speaks the same Spanish that you might hear around the U.S. So, you might hear, in Mexico or something. So I stopped at that, and then they say Sally decided to take a course in Spanish, And I stopped at that because she's supervising these staff that don't speak English and speak Spanish. We'll just go with that. And I'm like, well, why doesn't the company hire a Spanish-speaking supervisor? Was sort of what I was thinking at the same time. So I started not to put that question up because it was like a little culturally insensitive in my opinion. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. Okay, that's not the point of the question, right? The point of the question is if you're in a management situation, right, and you have the ability to connect better with your employees, that's interpersonal skills, isn't it? And that's really the takeaway of this question, not my technical argument or my, culturally sensitive argument as to other ways of getting around this issue. Okay, so interpersonal. Okay, that Guatemala thing, though, I'm pulling that off of. Did anyone ever see the movie El Norte? A film El Norte? Okay, you need to check that film out. Very powerful film about, and it's a brother and sister couple that are coming from Guatemala. They're pursuing political persecution. Their father was part of the resistance, and now they're going to kill the whole family. So they're trying to make their way up through Mexico into Los Angeles illegally. Okay, and so it's maybe a good time to watch that movie with everything that you hear being talked about in the election and all that. And the reason I remember that, I don't speak Spanish. My dad does, and I just remember him just cracking up when they were in Mexico and they're talking to a Mexican guy who's telling them how to speak Spanish like a Mexican so that you don't get sent back to Guatemala. You get sent back to to Mexico, because they get sent back to Guatemala, they're going to get killed. So they're telling them certain words to use in Spanish. So that's why maybe I was thinking that there was a different language, but maybe it's not. Maybe yeah, different dialect, right? Yeah. But still, telling this lady to go take a Spanish class might not get her there for these Guatemalans, right? So anyway, but stop. Okay, so that's it on that. Okay. Huh? It may be. I don't know. And then you have very small villages and that kind of thing. Anyway, the name of that movie is El Norte, the North. It's a really good movie. Okay, so anyway, it's sad, but it's a powerful movie. Okay, so you come over and you take a look at stages of decision making. Okay, and any decision making that is going to be made is going to have a circular structure to it, in that what you identify problems, opportunities, generate a possible solution, evaluate the solution, go ahead and implement the solution, and then you do what? You get feedback from that, and then you go and you feed that into the decision, and it's ongoing, right? This is why this will always be circular. And the evaluation of the decision, my personal biased opinion, is that the accounting information system is a key a feeder to that evaluation, right? And that we're going to, and when you get into Business 101B, that's where you're going to be really understanding managerial accounting and how we use that information to make those different decisions. Anybody take 101B yet? A couple people, one person? Okay. Right, a lot of break-even analysis, that sort of thing. Okay. Okay, good. Now you come over and functions of planning, and we have goals and objectives. Okay, goals are longer term, objective are what? Are shorter terms. Okay, so let's just take a look and see how we will look at these goals and the objectives. Okay, and goals are more tied to vision statements, whereas our mission statement is more tied to our objective. Okay, so our vision statement, I was looking for vision statements of the organization that we could all relate to, and then I thought, how about Ohlone College, right? Okay, so I went ahead and picked up Ohlone College vision statement, which is to be known throughout California for our inclusiveness, innovation, and exceptional student success, right? How about exceptional students? How about when you go up to accept the award, You say, and I want to thank Ohlone College, right? Whatever, right? Okay, so once we have exceptional students, we'll be known for exceptional student success, right? So as you guys start to move up that success ladder, don't forget Ohlone, right? Then what? That'll help us to achieve this vision statement. Then what? Mission statement, respond to the educational needs of our diverse community and economy by offering high quality instruction, supporting basic skills, career development. Aren't these objectives? Okay, so the vision is more of a goal, whereas what? The mission statement is more of the objectives, right, that you're currently trying to accomplish that will lead to the accomplishment of this vision. Okay? Okay, good. Now when we come over and we start to talk about strategic planning process, we're going to establish our corporate purpose. We're going to perform what they call a SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, and then we look at our what? Our opportunities that link up well with our strengths and what don't, in which our weaknesses aren't as exposed to those opportunities. But then, of course, we always have to look to what? To threats on those opportunities. What's this now? What's the picture taking now? Huh? You can't get the slides at all, right? Yeah, I'll put it in a PDF for you. And don't forget this whole thing is taped. Okay, so, but I'll put it in a PDF for you. Okay, not tape, but video. Okay, and then what? Then once we know what our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities are, you can take a picture if you want. I'm just trying to save you the hassle of having to click every slide that comes up. Plus, I don't photograph well. No, just kidding. Okay. I mean, I really don't photograph well, but that's not the reason. Formulate, well, you're like, you can only, what do you want, magic on film, John? Of course you don't photograph well. Then what? Then we come over and we will formulate our strategy, which will involve our tactical planning. Then we implement our strategy, and that becomes our day-to-day operational planning. Okay? So you come over, and I guess I reverse these. I should have had the vision statement and mission statement of Ohlone after this. So we don't need to say much more about this. I think we understand the difference between a vision and a mission statement. One is goals driven, the other is objective driven, right? Okay. Okay, so if we're doing a SWOT analysis, strengths, okay, what are our internal strengths? Brand power is a strength that some companies that have been around for a while. I teach a CPA review course. It is the largest CPA review course in the nation, and so they have brand power, and that what? All of the partners in the CPA firms took my review course to pass the CPA exam. And so what happens? They want their employees to take the same course because they know what they're getting for their money because they have experience with that course, right? Okay. Now what happens? What's the potential that something like that will erode over time, though? You're what? You're probably going to face that, and that as you start to face competition and then others become familiar with that other product, what? You could all of a sudden start to see your strength in that area erode a little bit, right? So you need to be concerned about the threats down here that are going to impact and go against and potentially expose, turn your weakness, your strength into a weakness, okay? Weaknesses. Lack of capacity or expertise compared to the competition, not being flexible. Okay, one of the problems that the company that I teach with is having trouble with is that now more and more companies that are coming into this business are utilizing the internet, are utilizing the fact that there's massive storage ability out there so that people can go online and offer competing and sometimes just effective courses, right? So you need to maintain that flexibility, make sure that you have expertise in emerging areas. External opportunities, right? Growing into geographic areas. The company that I teach the CPA exam for is trying to expand into foreign markets, into China, and I think I talked about some of that before, that more and more Chinese citizens in China are wanting to take the U.S. CPA exam because Chinese companies are acquiring U.S. companies or merging with U.S. companies. And one of the things that the Security Exchange Commission looks at when they're looking at those sort of mergers and that sort of, or even a Chinese company being listed on the U.S. stock exchanges, is do your staff, accounting staff, have enough U.S. GAAP knowledge? So what many of them are doing is companies are doing is they're sponsoring their employees to pass the U.S. CPA exam and maybe even get certified in the U.S. so that they can demonstrate that X numbers of our staff have either passed the U.S. CPA exam or actually hold U.S. CPAs. Okay, so this is an opportunity for growth. Okay, so you need to look at all of these in your SWOT analysis, and once you've done the SWOT analysis, then you're going to come up with goals, and they need to be specific, measurable, acceptable, realistic, timely, extending, and rewarding. Okay, so sometimes I get a little scared of mnemonics because I start thinking, so whoever came up with this mnemonic had SMART, and then they had to add an E and an R to make it spell smarter. Okay, so you got to be careful with mnemonics sometimes. That students like, oh, well, what's the difference between being acceptable and being rewarding? Because wouldn't it be acceptable if it was rewarding? And you're probably right. Okay, so it's not like there's some list that God came up with, that says this is how you are well-designed goals. This is what your text is coming up with. But certainly, what these are. Pretty good ones, right, to think about when you're coming up with goals, okay? Especially what? Realistic. If you set an unrealistic goal, everyone's just going to laugh it off, aren't they? Okay, so it has to be something achievable, okay? Okay, so when we set up our plans, okay, we'll have strategic plans, which is at a high level. How we're going to achieve our goals. Our tactical plan is going to talk about how we're going to implement our strategy. Contingency plan is really, well, what happens as we're trying to achieve our goal if something that's you shouldn't really call it unexpected, because if it was unexpected, then you probably wouldn't have a contingency plan in place for that. Okay, are we having trouble today? What's all this typing over here now? Oh, now you're taking notes. Okay. So we're sitting here and what? We're coming up with a contingency plan. What happens if a key person that is part of our tactical plan becomes ill? I mean, you don't like to think about, people getting ill, etc. And you're not going to try to sit there and say, well, Joe wasn't looking too good today, so let's come up with, a contingency plan. But you should have these sort of things generically in place, right? And so that if there are some changes, you're not sitting there not able to achieve the company's objectives because of illness or something like that. Operational plan involves what? Day to day. How are we going to go about this? Each day sales staff are going to have to report how they have met against their daily sales goals or whatever, and so that if someone starts to slip, we can give them some support to get them to where we want them to be, etc. Right? Okay, so we come over and we say that what? Mission statements reflect the personality of a company is a good way to put it. And that what? Your personality, hey, have you met that? Yeah, he's a nice guy, right? That's how he's met, right? That's currently how he is seen. You don't sit there and say when you meet somebody, I think someday he's going to be a very wise old man, do you? You say, have you met so-and-so? Oh, yeah, he's a nice guy. Yeah, we watched the game together. He's a nice, young guy, whatever, right? You don't sit there and say, someday I think he's going to be in charge of helping children or something. You don't say that. You say how they were met, right? So when we talk about the current status more of the company, that's our mission statement, okay? Goals are broad, accomplished, that an organization wants to achieve within a certain time frame. That's usually about 5 years is as far out as we go. 5 years is far enough out that what? It's starting to get down the road where we're going to give ourselves some room and some things to stretch for, but it's not so far out that what? It's going to be superseded by changes in technology or something, right? Okay. Um, Objectives are designed to help achieve the company's goals. So our goal is to be seen as the leading whatever in California, recognized throughout California, whatever it was. And in doing that, now what are we doing? We're meeting some of our objectives like providing, quality education, helping the students to find employment opportunities, etc. Right? Okay. Okay. In business planning, what is the main course of action created by top level managers? That's the strategic plan, right? That comes from the very top as to how we're going to achieve the goals and objectives of the organization. That's our strategic plan. A vision statement identifies what? What the business wants to be in the future, right? That's more of a vision. Okay. What presents the highest level of planning in an organization? Again, we start with what? The strategic plan, and then all these other things come in behind the strategic plan to support it. Huh? Okay. Now, when we look at resources that we'll need, there's capital resources, right? Personnel, if necessary, if we're a manufacturer, raw materials. Other resources could involve, additional things that I can't think of right now. Anybody got any other resources? Okay, so these are really our factors of production to a large extent. Okay, okay, good. Once a company's vision and mission statement have been articulated, management must assess a company's SWOT, which stands for what? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? Which type of plan is designed to keep an organization running in the event of a disruption? Contingency planning. One of the things that we look at as auditors in terms of contingency planning, by the way, it was interesting for me when I was going through this listing because it's talking about what? From inside the company, how to structure the company to achieve the objectives of the company with the mission statement, the vision statement, the strategic plan, the tactical plans, all of those sort of things. From my standpoint of the world as an auditor of federal agencies, we would come in and we would say, can we please see your strategic plan, your tactical plan, your contingency plans? We would see all those things and then look at them for what? Weaknesses, right? So once you put all that into writing, etc., now there's something there to measure yourself against. Unfortunately, sometimes it may be auditors who are measuring against that, and we would talk about some of the problems with their plans. And one area is with the contingency plans all the time that we saw was in their IT contingency plan. Okay, for example, we were looking at a credit union in Kansas City one time, and their strategic plan in the event of a disaster was that they had a bunch of equipment stored in some bat caves in Kansas City. If you ever go to Kansas City, supposedly like a thing to see is to go down by where the bat caves are, and you see all these, thousands of bats flying out at night, and it's like the sky gets blackened for, a few minutes with bats flying about for their night's prey or whatever the heck it is bats do. Okay, but anyway, our point was what? Okay, so let us get this straight. So there's a disaster in downtown Kansas City, and you're going to run out to the caves, fight the bats off, and get into where you're going to be able to fire things up. And we told them, sorry guys, that just doesn't pass muster for a strategic plan, for a backup plan. Okay, we saw another one. I don't know if I told this story or not, where the federal government uses lock boxes. Did I talk about that? The federal government used lock boxes What a lockbox is, it's a bank function. And what the bank function does is the money that gets, instead of going to the employees, it goes straight to the bank, and then the bank deposits it in the bank accounts of their clients. The federal government uses that for tax returns. Okay, and so when you file your tax return and you owe the federal government money, it goes to a lockbox, and then the lockbox processes that return. I told that story? I did tell a story? No? Some people say yes, some people say no, so I don't know what that means. But anyway, some of the lock boxes were shredding the returns because they couldn't keep up with the quota, and so Congress wasn't too happy in that they were shredding tax returns that had checks in them that were supposed to go to the U.S. Treasury. So they asked us to look at that, and we saw some weaknesses there. But one of the things that really wasn't part of the objective of the audit is the backup files for things that were being done in Hayward were being kept. The backup files should be kept off-site, but they were being kept in San Francisco. And the problem that we had with that from a standpoint of disaster recovery and their contingency planning, which is part of your contingency planning, is one event could take out the main and the backup, right? If you had an earthquake, could knock out the whole Bay Area, right? And so we wanted them to move that. And really, that before we even finished the audit, they had already moved that back up to Texas because I guess they didn't want to see that something would happen in the interim, and then we really have a point at that point, right, about the problems with their contingency. So all of these plans are part of the strategic plan of the company, and it helps keep the company on track. And again, the proof in the pudding is that if they're being audited and it's an operational type audit, the auditors very well would ask for some of these documents because it sort of serves as a baseline against which to measure performance, right? Okay, good. Now, organizational structure. Okay, you got the CEO, and then you got your different lines up here: marketing, human resources, finance. Now, you could flatten the structure. Okay, what we just saw was a vertical structure. You could flatten the structure where you're just organized around product lines or whatever, and so what happens? All of the decisions are being made much closer to top management. Okay, they call that a flat structure. I don't know. I look at these sorts of things, and I hear all the time people say, "Oh, well, we're a very flat company. Our structure is very flat," right? And I always wonder about that because what happens? Someone works and works to get themselves up to a what? Up to a top, a higher level management position, right? And then what? And then they're going to say, well, now all of this that I worked for and I strive for, let it all go. Is that what someone's going to do? I mean, it takes you, in business, it really takes you about, 10 years to not be completely out of it. It takes you another 10 years to get good at what you're doing, and then it takes you another 10 years to be able to control what you're doing. And then you're going to sit there after all that and say, well, what I really want to do, the main thing I want to do is surrender the control part of it, right? So when someone sits there and tells you, well, we're a very flat structure in that, be careful. That could mean that what? There's one dominating person sitting up there that everything has to go through, and that person has not been able to delegate anything down to what? To maybe some of those middle levels, and so that's why they want everything centrally located there. But now what? Now you got to get everything through that one person, right? And a lot of times the decision making becomes a matter of personality at that point as opposed to a matter of, the merit of the ideas, etc. So there are benefits and disadvantages to both of these styles of organizational structure. Okay, control cycle. Okay, again, we've already talked about this to a certain extent, and that these are circular. Okay, measuring performance. This is the part kind of stuff that I like, right? The more technical stuff here, where we sit here and one of the things that we would do is over time, we would look at our defects and we would try to get into the causes of those defects, okay? And by doing this, you can start to see what? Well, if, the cause of the defect is the quality of the steel or some sort of new compound, then what? Then you can start to attack these problems that are leading to the defects, and you can sort of click them off one at a time. Okay? This is called a fishbone diagram because it looks like a fishbone as we label the types of things that come up with the defects. I prefer the Pareto chart, which is what this is right here, because what it does is it gives you the frequency of the causes of the defects here. So which one of these are you more likely to attack first? The what? The broke, whatever that is. Broke what? Oh, the machine. I mean, you'd probably want a little more, description than it broke, okay, as to why it broke. So maybe I don't like this. This is terrible. Did not function. I mean, you'd want some better information than that. That's ridiculous sorts of descriptions. What does that mean? But you'd want to be descriptive in what's happening, and the more what? The more common it is that something's happened, the more energy you may want to put on that in trying to eliminate that defect. That's called a Pareto chart. Okay. Okay. So a what? Fishbone. Scatter plot. Okay, is a graphic that displays the values of two variables. Okay, and what we do with the scatter plot is we would go ahead and in a scatter plot, we're going to have different observations, and we're going to plot them against a couple of variables, and then we'll try to fit a line to those occurrences. And we can actually then, if we can fit a line to it, and we use something called regression analysis, we can actually come up with a formula for this line, which might be something like y equals ax plus b, x being the variable, okay, this variable, y being here. And then this will allow us to come up with, although not perfect, an approximate formula using statistical measures that will allow us to then sort of predict the relationship between the independent variable x and the dependent variable y. They call this regression analysis, and it's a very useful tool for helping us to decide the effect between two variables. Okay, that's a scatter plot. A fishbone diagram is that one where they look like a fishbone, and we try to determine the different factors that affect our defects, that cause our defects. Yeah. Okay. Okay, good, guys. That gets us through chapter 6 and 7. We're just going to continue like this, one chapter a class at a minimum. And if the chapters are short like these, we'll even get into 2. So be looking up for chapters, 8 and 9, potentially for next time, definitely 8. Okay? All right, guys. Have a good rest of the week. We'll see you on next Tuesday. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. I just want to pause this. Or actually,